Well, we are back for another year of the Disruptive Voices of the Pacific. This is our first episode for 2024. I am currently in Australia for a little while. This is my home, believe it or not, even though I spend a lot of time over in the Pacific. But today I have a guest with me, a woman who I've actually wanted for quite a while on this podcast. She also lives in Australia, but is of Pacific descent. Her name is Ellie Marie Diamond. Hello, Ellie.
Hi.
You're in a bit of a haze there today because your
In a bit of a
camera's
haze.
playing up, but I think it actually adds to the effects. Um, but Ali is a survivor of childhood abuse and the sex trade herself. I first heard her speak, might have been around 2015 in Melbourne. And the day I heard Ali speak, I think I wept, but I just wanted to crawl under the table and weep because she was sharing her story, some of her journey as a prostituted woman, and her ability. I've never heard anyone be able to just communicate so powerfully. So every time I hear Ali speak, she's amazing. She's now a leader survivor, which we'll talk a bit more about that later, what you're doing now, because God is using you and your story and your communication skills to impact our nation. You speak a lot into Parliament as well, but around the world. So thanks for being with us again, Ali. You're an inspiration.
Thank you.
You don't live too far away from me in the little town of Warwick. But Ali, maybe tell us a little bit of what life was like for you. Where did you grow up? Maybe a bit of your background. What nation do you descend from? And then a little bit of what life was like for you as a young girl.
So I grew up in Auckland in New Zealand. That was where I was born. I was born at National Women's Hospital. And at the time, I was born to my mum. She was only 15. And she was unable to look after me. So my grandmother adopted me. So I actually grew up knowing my grandmother as my mother. My grandmother was, and I'll refer to her as my mum because otherwise I get confused. So my mum was of British descent. So she was from England. And I guess growing up, it was tough because I was a coloured girl in a very white family. And at the time, I didn't know where I was from growing up. I had no idea. I remember being at school and kids always asking me, why are you brown? Why is your skin color different to your mum's? Where do you come from? And I would never be able to answer. And it seems small, but for me it was huge because I always knew I was different, but didn't know why or where, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I remember I used to see Polynesian communities and Maori communities and families, and I would remember as a kid yearning to have that sense of community and that sense of belonging and that culture. So it was something that I grew up always feeling like I was missing out on something.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, it was hard. My grandmother was a very strict Christian woman. So she belonged to a church called Worldwide Church of God. It was founded by a man by the name of Herbert W. Armstrong in California, or Los Angeles, somewhere there. Pasadena, sorry, that's where it was. They were very, very strict. So they didn't believe in Christmas or Easter or birthdays or anything like that. I remember I was never allowed to play sports on Saturdays because that was their Sabbath. Wasn't allowed to. I used to love singing and love music, but I was never allowed to participate in any musicals at the school because they always would do the Easter musicals or the Christmas musicals. So I always felt like I was always missing out on something. And that church was there's a lot of sexual abuse in the church. A lot of leaders who were sexually abusing children. And I was a victim of that. And it was always swept under the carpet. Kids would try and tell their stories and and they would never be believed. No, the ministers wouldn't do that, or the deacons wouldn't do that. And then I guess at a young age I was always labelled the troublemaker, or the liar, or I was promiscuous, or all these sorts of things. So it was tough growing up. My family were very disciplined. They used a lot of physical discipline. And so it was tough. It was very tough. Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's horrific for
Mm.
any young child to have to go through. The church abuse, were church leaders aware of this, or they were, and they just, it sounded almost a bit cultish to me.
Yeah. It back then it wasn't like that, because I wouldn't have even known what that word means. But now looking back, I'm like, I call it a cult, because that's what it reminds me of. They were aware of the sexual abuse, but they always swept it under the carpet. It was, nothing ever came of it. There was never any accountability, or nothing for the men.
So how did that then affect, a relationship with God? How did you view God knowing that church people were doing this to you?
Well, I guess I didn't believe it growing up. Like, I didn't believe he was there, or well, I don't know if I didn't believe he was there. I think it was more, I had a lot of questions. So I would always question, why me? What makes me different? Why is he not protecting me? Those sorts of questions. So I think it added to my low self-worth. So I was like, oh, there must be something wrong with me if God's not protecting me. There must be, I must be what my family say, that I'm that black sheep, or that bad egg, because he's not there for me like he is for others. Yeah.
Yeah. And it wasn't just abuse inside the church, you were also abused by uncles and family members as well. Again, was that something that the wider family were aware of and just swept away?
Yeah, they all knew about it, because I would tell you. It's the first thing you do, I think, when you're a kid, is, I went to my mum and I went, this is happening to me. And I straight away, the family unit, the white family unit, as I call it, was called. And immediately I was labelled as the lie. I was lying. If I wasn't lying, I must have done something to lead him on, to cause it to happen. Yeah, so it was tough.
I can't imagine. And so at what age did you find out, because you're from Samoa,
Yeah.
so what age did you realize that you had some connections to the islands, and that's why you were a different color?
So I think I always knew, but it wasn't actually until about I have to think, probably about 5 years ago, that I finally found out where I was actually from. So and that was only because I did an ancestry DNA test, because I'd heard that if you do these tests, it can come back with where your culture, and I guess what you're made up of. So I did one of those tests, and it came back that I was Samoan.
Wow.
And it was actually from that test that I found my dad. So yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Okay, I was just about to ask, have you known your dad? So have you met him or been in touch with him?
Yep. So when I was younger, so when I was about 16, I asked, because I'd grown up knowing my birth mother as my sister until I was about 12. So when I was about 16, I asked her, I started asking her questions. Where did I come from? Did she know my culture? Did she know who my dad was? I was at that age where I really wanted to find that somewhere to belong, that sense of belonging. And she actually said to me that she had been raped by 3 men, and she didn't know who my dad was.
Wow.
All she knew was that he maybe was Polynesian and came off one of the boats, was working on the boats. And I remember from that time, that was where I pretty much started going downhill really badly, like in my mental health and my spiritual health, my emotional health, because I instantly labeled myself the rapist child. I was like, oh, now it all makes sense. God put me, my theory. God put me on this earth to be to be that person who men can take advantage of. That's why I'm here. I'm the rapist child. And that's how I kind of justified to myself why all the sexual abuse and emotional and physical abuse had happened to me, was because that was my purpose in this world, was that. But when I did the DNA test, I came across a first cousin who was Samoan. So I reached out to her, and she was instantly excited. She was like, "Oh, your dad has to be one of my dad's brothers." But then we were still not very hopeful because there was 18 of them altogether, 18 brothers and sisters. So we were like, "Oh, this is not going to be no easy, feat trying to find out who it was." But when I was younger, my mother, gave me a photo, and she said to me, she said, "Alison," because my name Alison, Alison, I don't believe that what your mum is telling you is right. I actually believe that a young Polynesian boy who I used to work with in a supermarket, I believe that's your dad."
Okay.
But she couldn't remember his name. So I gave this photo to my first cousin's dad, and he looked at it and he said to me, was that in Auckland? And I can't remember where it was. And I went, "Yes, that's where it was." And he went, "Hang on, wait a minute, I'll get back to you in a minute." And he came back and he was like, "I know which one of my brothers is your dad."
Wow. Wow.
That was amazing. It was amazing. And I always say it's a miracle. I had prayed my whole life to know who my dad was. Didn't think I would ever meet him because we had no first name, no last name, didn't know where he was from, no information whatsoever. And
Yeah.
yet from a simple DNA test, I found my dad. And my mum was right. It was the young boy from the supermarket.
Wow.
So that was a big thing for me too, because I had spent, like I'm 52 now, so I'd spent about 46 years thinking that I was, this rapist child, that this is that my dad was a rapist, to
Mm.
find out that that wasn't the case at all.
Yeah. Wow. And what is your relationship with him now? Do you keep in touch regularly or?
Yeah, it's good. It's really, really good. So he was amazing. He instantly accepted me as his daughter. He said he always knew that he had another child out there. For some reason, he thought it was a boy, but he always knew because when my mother and him were dating, and when they were dating, she was pregnant.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Wow.
he always knew that he had a child out there somewhere. Yeah.
Wow. I never knew that part of your story, so that's exciting as well. Now let's come back to your teen years, and yeah, we heard a bit about growing up with dreadful abuse. You found yourself as a young mother as well, a bit similar to your birth mother.
Yeah.
At what age did you first give birth?
Well, I was 19 when I got pregnant, so I was still young, but not young. Um, he was my first boyfriend, like serious relationship, and he was extremely violent. When he found out I was pregnant, he picked me up, threw me across the room, did everything he could to get rid of the baby. He was a Australian boy, young Australian boy, um, or young man, should I say? Um, but when my daughter was born, my grandmother, um, the church didn't believe in single parents raising children. It was a big no-no. It was just something else I'd done wrong. They didn't believe in children out of wedlock or anything like that. So when my baby was born, she was very fair, very white, blue eyes, blonde hair. So instantly my mum was, "You can't raise her. You're a coloured woman. She's white. You can't, that's not going to work." So she was very shortly after removed from my care from my mum.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
would be very heartbreaking as well.
Yeah.
And then at what age did you find yourself entering into prostitution, and how
So
did that?
Yeah, so I think I was 21.
Okay.
Um, um, is when I found myself there. I had gone back. I had left the church and gone back to the church. Um, but having a baby out of wedlock, and I wasn't the. I'm trying to think of the word. I wasn't the. I guess I wasn't the perfect model of what a Christian woman should look like. So I had a lot of judgment and criticism and put downs, and never had that sense of belonging there. They were always trying to push me out. Soon after they took my daughter, because the church was involved in that as well. Soon after they took my daughter, they kicked me out of the church. Um, Basically closed the doors, sent out letters to all the congregation, saying do not have anything to do with Alison. She's no longer a member of the church. Um, so that's, yeah. So I was pretty much on my own. I had no one. So even though the church wasn't great, even though it wasn't a great place to be, the people in there weren't great, it was still the only life I'd known. They were the only people I'd known, the only community I'd known. I had no friends outside the church.
Mm.
I only had those people inside the church. So when I was kicked out, it was very isolating, extremely lonely. I was terrified. I was so scared. Um, and it was there that I entered the sex trade.
Wow. Man, so how things would have been different if the church had embraced you. I mean, this nonsense that you don't look like the perfect Christian woman. That's, it's
Yeah.
ridiculous, isn't it, when the church is meant to be for the broken. So in essence, the church is highly responsible for you ending up in the sex trade. Um, yeah. Anyway.
I call it, I guess in some ways I say the church really groomed me to enter the sex trade. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Can you explain that a bit more?
Well, by the sexual abuse and stuff in the church, by them ignoring it, not acknowledging it that it happened, not holding men accountable. It I grew up in a world where abuse was normal and
Mm,
it was accepted, and it was okay because they never showed me anything else. That's what they showed me. They basically showed me that a woman is, I always think as a mum raising my own kids, I always try to teach my kids, especially the girls and the boys, but I try and teach the girls that they're worthy and that they don't deserve to be treated in certain ways. Like when my girls were in school, you'd hear people say, "Oh, if the boy's bullying you, it means he likes you." Whereas I say, well, no, that's not okay. Whether he likes you or not, that is not okay. If he really liked you, he wouldn't have thrown a rock at you. If he really cared about you, he wouldn't have called you that horrible name.
yeah,
So
exactly.
trying to instill those lessons that so when they're older, they don't tolerate that kind of abuse and that, those rundowns.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never, I'm aware of so many churches, even here in Australia, but even more so in the Pacific, where the church leaders are covering up abuse, where they're aware that it's happening. And I've never heard the term the church has groomed me, but in essence, that's what they're doing. That's what's happening. Um, it's powerful. So may God clean us up and
Mm.
disrupt us.
The church enable the men's behavior by not holding them accountable.
Yeah.
So they almost encourage the men to keep perpetrating these crimes and offences by not holding them accountable.
Yeah. Yep, that's it. And look, and that can be said the same of a lot of families as well. We just want to hide things, and especially in a shame-based culture, so many families enable perpetrators again and again, which, yes, in your situation, groomed you for the sex trade. So how did you find yourself? I mean, yet we know it's kind of the the shunning of the church, which pushed you there. But you know, how did you knock on someone's door, or what did your first night look like?
Oh, the first night in the sex trade, are you asking, or
Yeah.
the first night
Yes.
out?
Yeah, the
Yeah.
first night in the sex trade.
The first night in was probably the one that I remember the most, being the first night. I remember I was terrified. Um, I was very, I guess, meek and timid, um, and very what's the word? I'm trying to think of the word. Um, Sometimes I find it hard to remember words. Very naive to what I was getting into. I had this theory within me that I was like, well, I'm I'm getting sexually abused anyway and beaten. I may as well get paid to have sex with men. Like I may as well be getting something out of it. Um, but I remember that first night, yeah, I was so scared. I had no idea what to expect. Um, I remember my very first client, the manager at the time was excited. They were really excited to have me because I was really petite back then. So it's very small. I was short and tiny. Never been in the sex trade before. So there's this thing when you first enter the sex trade. It's like being a virgin again because you knew. Everyone wants to be the first one. Every man wants to be the first one. So I was in high demand that night. I think I had over 20 clients that first night. I had nowhere to live, so I was living in the brothel.
Mm.
And I remember at the end of finally when the manager let me go to bed, I was bleeding everywhere. I was in so much pain. Not even the abuse compared to what I'd been through in the sex trade. The men were different. They were more violent, more entitled, I think because I'd paid for it, so they expected what they wanted. Men who wanted you to be the porn star, disappointed if you weren't. Men who wanted you to do everything that they'd seen on porn. Some men who wanted to watch porn while they were with you.
Yeah.
So they weren't having, they didn't see me as a human being. They just saw me like a sex toy, I guess. Yeah.
Yep. No, definitely. So, I mean, how did you end up at that brothel? Did you knock on the door and say, "Hey, I need a job," or did someone recruit you?
I answered an ad. So,
Oh,
yep, I answered an ad. I was desperate for money. And the ads, they all say, make $1,000 overnight or make X amount of dollars. And that was what attracted me to it. I wasn't 100%. I remember thinking, oh, I don't think I can do this, because I'd still been brought up in a church. So I still had this moral code, I guess. And I was like, oh, this is not going to be right. This is not good. I shouldn't be doing this. It's not right. But when I got there for my interview, they made me feel beautiful
mm,
and wanted and accepted and appreciated. And they made me feel like I belonged there. And they opened their arms and I was welcomed. So it was that made me go, yep, this is where I'm supposed to be. This is where I fit. This
yeah.
is where I belong, because I felt so at home there.
Ah, such a contrast from the church, isn't it?
Yeah.
However, we know that they know how to play the game as well, the sex trade. So it's a bit of a show as well.
I knew
But
it wasn't right. In the back of my mind, I knew it wasn't right.
mm,
But for my whole life, all I'd wanted was somewhere to belong, to feel like I was worthy, that I was beautiful, that I was loved, that I
absolutely.
had community, and that far outweighed that moral code. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. It's a human need. So, you and I, we hear the argument a lot that these, prostituted women, they've made a choice. They've chosen. And you answering an ad, you've chosen to be there, but just talk a little bit more into, was it your choice?
Well, I always say it was my choice to answer the ad, but I don't think grooming and coercion is really a choice. Do you know what I mean? Like they, you know, by giving me what they knew that I wanted, they saw that vulnerability. They saw that I was insecure. They saw that I had really low self-esteem because it's not hard. You tell someone they're beautiful. If they have low self-esteem, they will instantly put their head down and get this, get things, but they can't take the compliment. Do you know what I mean? So it's not hard to pick up on those cues that someone is vulnerable. So they gave me what I wanted to hear. So in some ways that's coercion, right? You're coerced into that false fantasy that you're going to have a family and be looked after and wanted and worthy. And yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, I say the choice was taken away from you at age 3 when you were first abused.
Exactly. Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah. That
so
was all I thought I was worth. Like I didn't think I was worthy of anything else. Even though I had big dreams, I always wanted to be, I loved to sing and I wanted to get into music and I wanted to be a lawyer. But all that stuff seemed it was out of reach for me. That was something that I'd been told my whole life. You'll never amount to that. You're reaching too high. That's not going to happen.
yeah. So, this promise of big money and you'll be looked after, what is the reality once you get into the sex trade?
Most of that, I remember going in and thinking, yeah, I'm going to be able to pay my bills and I'll be able to get a house and maybe I can get my daughter back. And it doesn't happen. Money goes on clothes because it's a competition. You're there with other women. You have to look your best because, it's not the buyers choose who they want to, take into a room. So you're always competing to get that, to get that buyer.
Mhm.
So you've got to have the best clothes, shoes, your hair done, grooming. And then before too long, you can't disassociate anymore like you used to be able to. So then you start drinking to numb the pain. And then when the drinking doesn't work, then you start doing the drugs. Someone will say to you, well, if you want to stay up all night and get some more money, just take this. This will keep you up longer. You'll be able to stay awake. You'll be able to do more work. So then
Yeah.
eventually that's where your money goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Easy earn, easy spend, isn't it? And just, talk a little bit about the physical toll on you again. A big argument in my own city when our brothel was opening up was that the women, they're going to receive health checks, they're going to be looked after. There's a panic button in the room she can press at any time. Give us a bit of which I didn't buy into, but this is what they sell the public. What's the
There were panic buttons in the room. I guess the thing is, can you reach it?
exactly?
It's really difficult to reach it if you have a man on top of you who's extremely big. It's difficult to reach. Then there's the question: does anyone ever come? Well, no, they don't. They never came ever. So the panic buttons were they were just I don't know. I used to say they were just there to look good. Make other people feel better that they were there. But they never got used. In regards to checks, I think I only ever went to get checks when there was actually something wrong with me. So I remember, this is how naive I was. When I first went in there, I think I'd been doing it for about 6 months, and I was really itchy down below. And I was freaking out that I'd caught something, and I had crabs, and I had never ever heard of crabs before. I didn't know what they were. I remember having a massive panic about it, and the girls telling me how to get rid of them. And then I think that was when I went for my first health check, just to, because I was in that frame of mind of what if there's something else wrong with me. But I think I had 2 in the whole 6 years I was there. Yeah. So not.
Did you work at one brothel or did you move around a bit?
So I worked at one brothel for a while. And then I had some issues with some of the girls there. and ended up moving to another one. And then I started moving from one to another to another.
And what did you see over the years? How were you treated? But what did you see in that industry?
So I would say the white girls were definitely treated better than the colored girls by both the managers and the buyers. Um, the buyers wanted, the blonde, tall, big busted bombshell. That was their fantasy, because back then that was what they saw on the pornography was, the blonde porn queen star. Especially from things like, the Playboy Mansion, and, that's I guess, the dream girl when it comes to things like this. They would always get paid more. They were always what I call the pretty woman ones, where the buyers would come in and say, you shouldn't be here. You should be somewhere else. You shouldn't, this is not where you should be. Let me get you out. Let me pay for you to get out. So they always had that, I guess, that choice, I guess. Whereas the colored girls didn't have that. We would be the last to be picked. We would be paid the least. We would be treated the worst. Because we were colored, I guess. They thought we were, I don't know, I never really understood it before, but it was almost like they just thought we were trash, so they could do whatever. And we were lucky that we were lucky we were chosen by them.
Yeah.
Because they wanted the white one.
Yeah.
So we're lucky that they chose us. Yeah.
Leftovers. So racism is alive and well. And this is why we call it the sex trade and not the sex industry, because it's not an industry where you want your daughters working in, where there's good work, health, and safety practices and all of that. It's a slave trade.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. And and I always say men don't, when men go in there to buy women, they don't have a checklist where they go, is this one trafficked? Is this one underage? Is this one here by choice, or has she been coerced? Is this one here because she wants to be or because she's been forced to be? They don't have a checklist. Men don't care when they come in if you've been trafficked or not, or if you're there by choice or you're not, or they don't care.
Yeah. No. Hey, here's my money and give me.
Managers don't care either, and neither do the owners of the brothels. They don't care.
No. It's all about the money.
The younger, the better. So the younger you are,
yeah,
and the wider you are, the bigger money maker you are.
Yeah. Yep. So, here in Australia, you have been, I won't say being used, you have put up your hand to go in front of politicians, because in Australia there's a push to decriminalise prostitution, which would just mean that you can set up brothels in the main street of town. You can go to open days at schools and promote this as a viable, great career choice. So you have been fronting up, particularly down in South Australia, and we need you here in Queensland because it's knocking on the door. I know it's knocking on the door in the Pacific nations as well, and it's already been there in New Zealand. Why is decriminalisation a bad idea?
Because it comes back to what we were talking about before in the church, when, holding those men accountable. If you don't hold them accountable, then you're just encouraging their behaviour. And full decriminalisation decriminalises everybody. I don't know whether people understand. I think a lot of people think, oh, great, it decriminalises the women. Yep, that's what we need. But it also decriminalises the buyers and the brothel owners and the pimps and the traffickers. It criminalises everybody, because even though trafficking is illegal in Australia, it becomes too hard to differentiate between a trafficker and a business owner. Do you know what I mean? Because they're not going to just come out and say to you, oh yeah, I trafficked these women. And the women who have been trafficked aren't just going to come out and go, oh yeah, I've been trafficked. They'll actually say to you, yeah, I'm here by choice.
Yep. So it totally becomes open slather. And again, a place like Germany, we've seen high-rise brothels, with floors and floors of floors. I think New Zealand has been looking at something similar. Part of the excuse they say is that, you know, it takes it out of the back blocks and brings it out into the open. But I think we've seen more damage done to women in New Zealand. I was just reading a report you'd written yesterday about the amount of deaths that have happened,
Yeah.
and no one's held accountable because it just becomes an open meat market, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's horrible. It's really heartbreaking. And, you know, even in New Zealand, you know, they'll tell you that there's no sex trafficking in New Zealand. They like to tell you there's no child sex trafficking in New Zealand. They call children over there child prostitutes. It normalizes it, like full decriminalizes, normalizes it and desensitizes everyone to it. I think in New Zealand recently there were some articles come out in media, and they were sharing stories of sex workers. I hate using that word, but just because that's what they use, they'll use it. And it was telling the story of how they entered into the sex trade, and they entered as children. But there was nothing in the story about how terrible it was that this child had been exploited. It was just like, how great is this? This runaway child entered when they were 14, and now they're living this amazing life. I don't understand. But that's how normalized it's become and glamorized.
Yeah, nothing glamorous. I mean, speaking to, you know, for how many years were you in it?
It's about 6 years.
6 years. So what was the physical, mental, and emotional toll that took on you?
So back then, I was highly dependent on drugs and alcohol. Didn't end with that dependency, but definitely left with it. Had been in and out of psychiatric institutes, loads of flashbacks. But I don't think I realized the full effect until I came out, until years later. So now, probably now, you know, in the last few years, I've realized the full effect of what happened to me in the sex trade. I now have been diagnosed with complex post-traumatic stress disorder, a whole range of different, there's a whole list, like there's a massive list of different things I've been diagnosed with. I still get massive flashbacks. My relationships have been affected. I have major trust issues with men. I have, when I came out of the sex trade, I've had 2 serious relationships that I've had children with. They both haven't ended well. They were both violent and abusive, because I still thought that was normal, that behavior was an acceptable way to live, or an acceptable relationship to be in. I thought all men were like that. All men were violent and abusive. It's normal for men to behave in that way. It must be something that I've done wrong. I should have, you know, cooked for them more, or cleaned for them more, or been more attentive to their needs more. When they cheated, you know, I was like, oh, I should have given them sex more. I should have looked after myself better. I shouldn't have put on weight. I should have, you know, put makeup on a bit more. It was never about them. It was always about me and what I had done wrong. So that has been hard for me. And I still say, now I've made this, I made a promise to my kids when I came out of the last one. I promised them that I would not get into another relationship again, unless they ticked a few boxes. And one was that they were, had the same beliefs and passions I did, with not just, you know, Christianity, but also with advocacy and abolition work, that they needed to be passionate about those sorts of things, and a few other things. And because I knew that if I found a man like that, then they had been sent by God.
Yeah,
they would be okay. Those ones would be good. Yeah.
Yes.
And I'm still single, so so they must be far and few between.
Ali, I'm single too, and there are good men out there, but they're not always easy to find either, especially when you have standards and won't put up with crap, which I think is very important. If we're going to teach our daughters and other young people that they have worth, we've got to live it ourselves, and that includes the men we choose.
Because, you know, as I learned, how we behave around our kids is what we're letting our kids know is acceptable. So if we're in a violent relationship, then that's what we're teaching our children is normal.
Yeah.
And I've learned that that's not what I want to teach my kids at all. You know, I don't want my children growing up believing that a normal relationship is filled with violence and abuse. And I don't want my boys growing up believing that that's the normal way to treat women either. So,
Mm. Yeah. No, brilliant. So now, you're what we would call a leader survivor. A survivor because of the fact that you're alive, because you've seen many prostituted women not come out alive. So the fact that you're alive, yes, you're still on a journey of healing, but you're clothed and you look well today. But you're also a leader, and I've seen you among your peers, other survivors, and they certainly look to you. You're leading the charge a lot here in Australia, but also in New Zealand. You run an organisation, Wahine Toa Rising. Tell us a little bit about that.
So in 2019, a group of us got together because there's no exit services or support in New Zealand at all, like nothing. And in 2019, a young Maori mother, Bella Tapania, she was murdered, and she left behind a little girl. And it breaks my heart because I think, if there had been exit services or support services or trauma-focused services for survivors of the sex trade, perhaps she wouldn't have gone back because she had tried to exit. So perhaps she wouldn't have gone back and this little girl would still have her mum and her mum would still have a daughter. Do you know what I mean? So we started Wahine Toa Rising, which means Warrior Women Rising, in the hopes that we could somehow, I guess more than anything else, just be a shining light that there's hope for others, that others would see us and go, there is a way out. We are worthy of more. We do deserve more. There is a community out there who will welcome us.
Yeah, yeah, that's beautiful. So much hope is needed. So much money is needed to run these things too and to offer these services because, especially in governments where they criminalise prostitution, they're not going to offer exiting services because, what's wrong with us? And again, this is a challenge for the church. We should be offering these services very much. So, what's your plans for this year? I know Exodus Cry, for those of us who are familiar with their work, they do an amazing work around the world and they produce brilliant documentaries, and they've got a new one out and you're going to be touring with them. Tell us a bit about that.
So it's really, really exciting. I've been watching Exodus Cry for a while and love the work that they do. They are just, here's a Christian organisation that the type of Christian organisations we need here in Australia and New Zealand, who are really stepping outside of the box and out of their comfort zones and just creating change and being just gifts of hope is what I call them. But they have some amazing, amazing documentaries. And the one coming here is called Buying Her. It's brilliant. It really puts the focus on the type of men who are buying women. And these are Christian men in this movie. Christian men who have gone from a pornography addiction to not being able to get enough of that, to going into buying prostituted, women who have been prostituted, and in some cases, a man who committed sexual violence outside of that, and ended up being put in jail for it. And then it's a story of hope too. It shows how they've come out the other side, how they have been held accountable, how they've realized their mistakes, and how they've transformed their lives into now helping others. So it's a beautiful story. It's a story of reality. It is a big reality check, but it's one that needs to be told because these types of men are in churches in Australia and New Zealand. I came from a church in New Zealand and there was heaps of sexual abuse from those men. So we need to, as Christians and as communities, really be holding our men accountable and teaching these things in our churches.
Yeah. Yeah, great. Well, we look forward to seeing that, and glad that you'll be on the road, because part of showing this movie is having a panel afterwards, the movie as well. So hopefully we can get it into some of the Pacific Island nations, because it's alive and well over there. And the porn industry is quite often the open doorway to a lot of this.
I call it the gateway to hell.
Yes, gateway to hell. So look, Ali, our time is up. Thank you.
Okay.
Firstly, because I know every time you share your story, there's a price to pay. It's not easy. You're reliving hell. But I know that you understand that by speaking up, sharing your story, it's giving courage to other people. And particularly, in Fiji, we are working hard to break a culture of silence, a culture of shame, a culture of religion. And I think you've experienced all three, but you're smashing them apart with your voice. And God has redeemed and restored all of that, which is beautiful. So thank you. And please look her up. There's, if you Google Ali Marie Diamond, you find stories and YouTube and other interviews with her too. She's an amazing woman. And who knows, one day maybe we'll get you back to Samoa and Fiji and Vanuatu and get you to
All
the
of them. All of them.
all of them. We've got to do a big tour.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah. And if anyone wants to donate so I can keep doing this work, that's really important too, because I'm completely non-funded. I don't get paid. But I don't do it to get paid, but it obviously helps for me to keep doing the work. But I don't, it's my heart. That's why I do it.
Your heart, but you got to eat as well. And you do have children and grandchildren. Good. All righty. Well, God bless, and we'll be in touch.
Thank you. Yeah.